Welcome to Campfire Horror Tales. Settle in closer to the fire and listen carefully, because tonight's story isn't for the faint of heart. This is a true motel horror story, a night shift nightmare where time itself becomes your enemy. One man, one lonely motel, and a room that never lets go. Are you ready to check in? Because once you do, there's no leaving. The road to Pinewood was darker than I remembered. The asphalt shimmered under the dying light of the gas station sign half a mile back, and for a long stretch there was nothing. Just the hum of my engine and the faint sound of gravel crackling under the tires. The motel stood alone by the highway, a 2-story slab of fading green paint and flickering neon. The sign buzzed weakly, struggling to keep the word vacancy alive. Most of the letters were gone, burned out years ago, leaving a fractured red glow that bled into the night. The air smelled like rain that would never come. It was supposed to be my last shift. Just one night. They were closing the place in the morning, tearing it down, maybe selling the land. A part-time gig to make rent before I moved on. That's what I told myself anyway. Inside, the lobby felt like a time capsule that never decided which decade to belong to. The faded carpet held the scent of cigarettes and pine cleaner. A mounted clock above the desk ticked too loudly, like it was trying to outlive the silence. The vending machine near the wall hummed, its light flickering in a pulse that matched my heartbeat. I dropped my bag behind the reception counter. The shift schedule was still pinned to the corkboard, every name crossed out except mine. Daniel H. Last night. I checked the office log. No reservations, no guests. Just me and the endless stretch of desert outside. When I turned on the old monitor that showed the security feeds, the images came up one by one, grainy and distorted. Room corridor, dimly lit. Parking lot empty. Pool drained and cracked. Stairwell motionless. The only sound was the faint buzz of electricity through the ceiling lights. Behind the counter, the old manager had left a note. I unfolded it carefully, the paper soft and yellowed. Don't go near room 9. That one stays closed. The handwriting trembled, like the ink itself was tired. I laughed under my breath, not because it was funny, but because the silence was unbearable. The kind of laugh that breaks the tension for half a second, then makes it worse. I told myself it was just superstition, a piece of old motel folklore. Every place like this had one. A room where someone died, a door that never opened again. Still, when I looked down the hall toward room 9, that long corridor past the ice machine, I felt something tighten in my chest. The wind pushed against the front windows, whistling through a crack in the frame. Somewhere in the building, a loose sign clattered against the wall. I made coffee in the small back room. It tasted like burnt dust, but it gave me something to do. The motel had a smell that never changed. Stale air and detergent that couldn't quite cover the years. Every now and then, headlights passed on the highway, painting the lobby walls with brief flashes of white before disappearing again into black. Each time, I hoped a car would pull in. No one ever did. Midnight came and went. I walked the halls, holding the flashlight they'd left in the drawer. The beam caught motes of dust floating in the air, suspended like ghosts of the past. The carpet swallowed the sound of my steps. Every door had the same brass number plate, except room 9. Its plate was missing, just a faint rectangle of cleaner paint where it used to be. A cold draft slipped under the door. When I touched the handle, it was freezing. I didn't turn it. I don't know why. My hand just froze there. Fingertips against metal. Heartbeat rising until I could hear it echo in my ears. I stepped back. Back at the front desk, the clock said 1:17 a.m. The second hand ticked unevenly now, like it was struggling to keep time. I poured another cup of coffee. It was already cold. The TV in the lobby, one of these heavy box sets built into the corner wall, flickered to life on its own. Static. Then a channel I didn't recognize. It showed the front desk from a different angle, like one of the security feeds, but sharper. I saw myself standing there, cup in hand. I turned toward the camera on the wall. It was off, disconnected, the light above it dead. When I looked back at the screen, the image had changed. The me on the screen wasn't moving anymore, just staring into the camera, eyes black, face frozen. Then it cut to static again. The lights flickered. Something shifted deep in the building. A door opening slowly, hinges crying out in protest. The monitor beside me clicked softly as one of the security feeds refreshed. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure move in the corridor outside room 9. Just a shadow slipping into view. Then gone when I blinked. I leaned closer to the screen. The image shimmered, distorted. Empty hallway. The sound came again, this time closer. Footsteps. Not hurried, not slow. Just steady, deliberate. Walking down the hall toward the front desk. The microphone near the lobby speakers crackled to life, picking up faint white noise from the cameras. Underneath it, I could almost make out breathing. Long, shallow, controlled. I called out. My voice sounded small in that vast, hollow space. The breathing stopped. And then silence. I waited for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. Minutes passed. When I looked at the clock again, it was 2:03 a.m. The feed from the hallway showed nothing. The door to room 9 was still closed. I sat there for a while, staring at the black and white images, the hum of electricity in the air, the endless, suffocating quiet of the Pinewood Motel. Outside, the desert wind whispered against the glass, carrying with it the faint echo of a sound I couldn't quite place. Like a bell, ringing once, far away. And for the first time that night, I started to wonder if the motel had really been empty at all. The bell rang at exactly 2:17 a.m. It wasn't loud, just a soft metallic chime from the old service bell on the counter. The kind of sound you'd barely notice during the day. But at night, in that dead silence, it cut through everything like glass. My first thought was that maybe someone had pulled in. I glanced through the lobby window, expecting headlights. But the parking lot was empty. The desert stretched out in every direction, a black ocean under a bruised sky. The bell rang again. I froze. The air conditioner hummed above me, low and uneven, the only other sound in the room. There was no wind, no draft, nothing that could have made that sound. And yet the bell moved, trembling slightly on its base, like someone had just touched it. I felt the hair on the back of my neck lift. I told myself it was a vibration from the AC unit, or maybe a trick of my nerves. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been standing right there, across the counter from me, a second ago. I looked down. On the counter next to the bell was a single brass room key. Room 9. The number etched deep into the metal. It hadn't been there before. I would have noticed. The key felt cold when I picked it up. Not cool, but cold, like it had been kept in ice. For a moment, I thought about tossing it back, pretending I hadn't seen it. But something about it demanded attention, the way objects do in dreams, when they seem to hold a meaning you can't quite reach. The security monitors flickered. One of the cameras had switched. Hallway B, outside room 9. The feed was dim and grainy, but I could see movement. Someone, or something, was standing in front of the door. The figure was still, just a dark outline, shoulders slumped slightly, head tilted down. I leaned closer to the screen. The image wavered, static washing over it like fog. When it cleared, the hallway was empty. The key slipped from my fingers and clattered against the floor. A faint echo of footsteps came from somewhere down the hall. Slow, deliberate steps that stopped between each breath, as if listening. I hesitated for a long time before grabbing the flashlight and heading toward the corridor. The beam of light shook in my hand, darting across faded wallpaper and doors that all looked the same. The carpet muffled my steps, but I could still hear another set beneath mine, just a half beat behind, like an echo that didn't quite sync with reality. I reached room 9. The door was closed, the brass handle dull and worn. No sound came from inside. I raised my hand to knock, but before I could touch it, the light flickered above me. For a split second, the hallway went completely black. When the light returned, the door to room 9 was slightly open. The air rushing out of that room was cold enough to sting my throat. It smelled faintly of iron and rain, and beneath that, something older. Something that had been waiting. I should have run, but I pushed the door open instead. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing an empty bed, a dresser, a small TV covered in dust. Everything looked untouched, except for one thing: a pair of shoes sitting neatly beside the bed. Men's shoes, old, the kind they stopped making decades ago. I stepped inside. The TV came alive with static, though it wasn't even plugged in. The screen glowed weakly, showing a faint reflection, not of me, but of the door behind me, slowly closing on its own. I turned around just in time to see it click shut. The handle didn't budge when I tried it. Locked. The static from the TV grew louder, almost like whispering now, words buried beneath the noise. I leaned closer, trying to catch a phrase, a pattern. And for an instant, I saw a face in the static. Not clear, not detailed. Just the shape of someone staring back, their mouth moving soundlessly. I stumbled backward, hitting the dresser. A drawer slid open, spilling yellowed papers across the floor, receipts, postcards, old registration forms. I knelt and picked one up. Name: E. Carter. Check-in date: May 12th, 2012. Checkout: empty, no signature. No handwriting besides that neat typed text. I remembered that name. It was the last one in the old registry book at the desk. The guest that never checked out. The whispering from the TV stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Then, slowly, the screen began to display a new image. Not static anymore. The motel lobby, the counter, the bell, the same angle as before, but live. Except in the image, I wasn't there. The counter was empty. I turned to leave, heart hammering, but the door was already open again. Wide this time, light spilling in from the hallway. I didn't remember unlocking it. When I stepped out, everything looked slightly wrong. The light was dimmer, yellower, like the bulbs had aged in seconds. The wallpaper colors had changed, faded somehow. The air smelled of old perfume and mildew. I hurried back to the lobby. The coffee cup I'd left on the counter was gone. In its place sat another one, cracked and stained, with steam curling faintly from inside. The clock above the desk still ticked, but the second hand no longer moved. On the guest log, a new line had appeared, written in the same trembling hand as the note from Marjorie. Daniel H. Room 9. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember if I'd written it myself. Outside, the wind rose again, dragging sand across the windows. For a moment, I thought I saw a shape out there. Someone standing by the sign, staring up at it. The neon sputtered, flickered, then went dark entirely. When the lobby lights came back on, the figure was gone. But on the monitor, in that same frame of the parking lot, the camera showed him still standing there, motionless, facing the motel. And behind him, at the far edge of the frame, another shape began to move toward the building. The ringing started at 3:03 a.m. It was the old desk phone, a beige rotary relic with a cracked plastic shell, the kind you see in thrift stores and horror films. The sound didn't match the place. It was too loud, too clean, like it came from somewhere newer, sharper, wrong. For a few seconds, I just stared at it, waiting for it to stop. It didn't. The sound filled the lobby, bouncing off the yellow wallpaper and hollow walls, cutting through the faint hum of electricity. I finally picked it up, my hand trembling just enough to make the receiver clack against the cradle. No one answered. The line hissed softly, a steady pulse of static, like breathing through broken speakers. I almost hung up, and that's when I heard it. A voice. It wasn't distant. It wasn't muffled. It was my own. You shouldn't be here. The whisper was faint but unmistakable. The same tone, the same breath, like hearing a recording of yourself from another room. I froze. My throat tightened as if I'd swallowed cold air. I waited, but the line went dead. Only static remained. Then, a click. The dial tone resumed, flat and final. I set the receiver down carefully, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. The motel had old wiring, old everything. Maybe a short circuit, some crossed line that replayed a message from God knows when. That explanation should have helped. It didn't. The phone rang again. Same tone, same rhythm. I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at the security monitors. All 4 feeds were active, but something was off. The timestamps at the bottom right corner were wrong. They were moving backward, ticking in reverse. On camera 2, the corridor leading to room 9, a shadow passed. It wasn't walking. It just slid across the frame, like a smudge dragged across glass. The phone stopped ringing. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. I got up, pacing the lobby, trying to slow my thoughts. The sound of my footsteps echoed against the tiled floor. But there was something strange about it. Each step seemed to come a split second too late, like the sound was lagging behind me. The air felt thicker now, like breathing through damp cloth. When I reached the counter, I saw the guest log still open from earlier. My name was there, written neatly in black ink. But underneath it, a new entry had appeared. Carter, room 9, 3:03 a.m. The exact time the phone first rang. The key to room 9, the one I'd found earlier, was gone. I checked the pegboard behind the counter. Every key hung perfectly in place, except that one. A faint, empty hook, swaying slightly as if someone had just taken it. The phone rang a third time. This time, it didn't stop. I lifted the receiver again, holding my breath. The same static hissed softly. No words, no whisper, just noise, until it began to shape itself into a rhythm. A breath, a pause, another breath, then a sound, low and wet, like a recording of someone swallowing or trying to speak underwater. The line popped once. Check in. The words looped, distorted, breaking into themselves like a scratched record. I hung up. The ringing continued anyway. I ripped the cord from the wall. The phone stayed silent for a few seconds, then, impossibly, it began to ring again. No power, no line, just that awful sound filling the room, vibrating in my bones. The lights flickered. Something shifted behind me. On the nearest monitor, a figure stood in the hallway. The same corridor, the same camera as before. This time it was closer, facing the lens directly. I couldn't see the face, just the outline of a head, a torso and arms that hung too long, too still. The feed glitched every few seconds as if the image itself couldn't stay stable. Then, on another monitor, camera 1, the lobby feed, I saw myself. Not the current me, but a version from a few moments ago. Standing at the counter, answering the phone for the first time. Watching that replay of myself made my stomach twist. The way my head tilted. The way my hand trembled. It was the same, down to the smallest detail. Except this time, after hanging up, the version on the screen looked straight into the camera. Right at me. The screen went black. The sound of the phone stopped instantly, replaced by a deep electronic hum that pulsed through the air like a heartbeat. I took a step back. My knees hit the stool, nearly knocking me over. The smell in the lobby changed. Ozone, metal, rain-soaked dust. I could almost taste it. Then, from the back hallway, came the sound of another door creaking open. Slow, reluctant. The security feed switched automatically. Room 9. The door was open. Light spilled out in a faint, grayish beam that didn't look natural. Too pale, like the light of an old TV in an empty room. The camera began to zoom on its own, frame tightening until it filled with darkness. And in that darkness, just before the feed cut, I saw movement. A hand, pale and slow, pressing against the inside of the door. The hum stopped. Every light in the motel flickered off. For a full minute, there was nothing. No sound, no motion, no sense of time. Then, somewhere deep in the walls, the phone started ringing again. Not the one at the front desk. A different one, older, deeper. The sound echoed through the building, bouncing off the empty rooms, traveling down the halls like something alive. When I looked back at the counter, the guest log had changed again. Daniel H., Room 9, checked in. The words "checked in" were written in fresh ink, still wet, the strokes trembling slightly, as if the hand that wrote them had been shaking. The smell of iron grew stronger. And from somewhere in the distance, faint but clear, I heard the unmistakable sound of a second bell, ringing once, long and low, somewhere beyond the walls. It echoed through the motel, through the static-filled monitors, through me. I didn't know it yet. But that sound marked the moment Pinewood decided I wasn't leaving. When the lights came back, they didn't come all at once. They returned in slow, stuttering waves, buzzing through the motel like the building was trying to remember what light felt like. Each bulb flickered in its own rhythm. The hallway fluorescence first, then the lobby lamp, and finally, the neon sign outside that spelled vacancy. It glowed in broken pink letters now. Half dead. The clock behind the counter read 3:03 a.m. again. I could have sworn I'd been standing there for hours. The air smelled different, dust mixed with something faintly sweet, like rotting fruit left too long in a drawer. My head ached with pressure, the kind that sits right behind the eyes. I leaned on the counter, breathing slow, trying to remember what had just happened. The ringing phone, the monitors, the name in the logbook, Room 9. I wasn't dreaming. There was proof. I flipped open the guest log again, half expecting the writing to be gone, but it was still there. The black ink dried into the page like it had been written years ago. My name, Daniel H., below it, E. Carter, and under that, the final line. Checked in. The words shimmered faintly under the fluorescent light, the ink reflecting a dull, oily sheen. I ran a finger over the page. It was dry. Then I noticed something else. Faint impressions of other names. Dozens of them pressed into the next pages, as if someone had written there once and torn the top sheet out. The imprints formed a kind of fossil record. Dates, initials, room numbers. And next to several of them, scrawled roughly, the same two words. Didn't check out. My chest tightened. A soft noise drifted from down the hall. A door creaking, then closing again. I froze, listening. The sound didn't echo like normal. It was heavy, flat, almost inside the walls. I grabbed the flashlight from the counter and stepped into the hallway. The beam cut through the darkness, thin and shaky. Wallpaper peeled in long strips, revealing damp plaster beneath. Every few feet I passed a framed photo. Old, faded prints of the motel from decades ago. In each photo, the building looked slightly different, smaller, brighter, like it had aged in reverse as I walked. Then I saw it. A frame hanging crookedly near the end of the hall. Inside wasn't a photo, but a Polaroid, glossy and modern, taped crudely behind the glass. The picture showed the front desk, the same one I'd just left. Except there was someone behind it. A man. His face was blurred, overexposed by the flash. But I could still make out the shape of the uniform, the same khaki shirt and name tag I was wearing. Beneath the photo, written in blue pen, last shift, 3:03 a.m. My throat went dry. I touched the frame. It was cold. Too cold. When I turned back toward the lobby, the lights behind me had dimmed again, swallowed by the shadows creeping along the walls. I started walking faster, but every step seemed to take me deeper instead of closer. The corridor stretched like elastic, swallowing sound. Then, a flicker. The lights flared white, blinding for a second. And when my vision cleared, the hallway was different. The wallpaper was new, the carpet clean. A vase of fake flowers stood on a small table that hadn't been there before. I could hear voices now, soft, murmuring behind closed doors, snippets of laughter, the hum of an old television, the rhythmic thump of footsteps overhead. The motel was alive again. I reached for the nearest doorknob. It was warm. I pushed the door open a crack. Inside was room 5, lit by the dim glow of a bedside lamp. A man sat on the edge of the bed, facing away from me, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He wasn't moving, not even breathing. The television across from him flickered with static, but the reflection on the screen showed him grinning. A stretched, unnatural grin that split across his face like it didn't belong there. I stepped back, and the door slammed shut on its own. The voices stopped instantly. When I turned toward the lobby again, the corridor had returned to its decayed state. Wallpaper torn, carpet rotting. No light but my trembling flashlight beam. The only sound left was my own breath. I made it back to the front desk and grabbed the motel key ring again, scanning for room 9. Still missing. The monitors buzzed softly behind me. One of them flickered. Camera 3, the back office. I hadn't noticed that feed before. On the desk in that room, there was something lying under the security light. A stack of Polaroids. The timestamp on the corner of the screen read 3:03 a.m. Every single camera read the same. I didn't want to go back there, but I needed to see. The office door creaked open with a sound like tearing paper. The air inside was colder, the floor coated in a thin layer of dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. The Polaroids were spread across the desk like a deck of cards. I picked one up. It showed the motel lobby. Empty. Dark. Another photo. The parking lot. The outline of a man standing by the sign, his face obscured by shadow. Another, the hallway, with a blurred figure halfway down. Each photo was time-stamped differently, but all had one thing in common. 3:03 a.m. was scrawled on the bottom corner in black marker. The last one made my heart stop. It was me. Standing in the hallway, flashlight in hand, staring straight into the camera. Except I hadn't taken it. The flash had captured something behind me. A tall figure, almost blending with the wall. Its face turned away, but its hands reaching toward my shoulder. I dropped the photo. The moment it hit the floor, the lights went out again. The monitors crackled, shifting rapidly between feeds, static chewing through the images like rot. Then all screens froze on one view. Room 9. The door was open, light spilling into the hall. Inside, just visible, was a shape, the same pale hand I'd seen before, now gripping the doorframe as if inviting me closer. The intercom clicked on by itself. Static filled the room, then a voice, low, almost kind. Daniel, check-in's not over. Then silence. I stood there, every nerve screaming to run. But I couldn't move. The clock above the monitors ticked backward again, the hands spinning until they stopped, pointing to the same time, 3:03 a.m. And with each slow tick, the air thickened, bending the sound until it was no longer ticking but beating, a pulse that didn't belong to me. The motel was awake again, and it remembered my name. The silence after the voice ended was almost holy, dense, suffocating, sacred in its stillness. I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent tubes overhead, but even they seemed hesitant to breathe. Room 9. The number pulsed in my mind like a migraine, each repetition heavier than the last. My hands trembled as I reached for the flashlight again, though I already knew what I was about to do. There was no logic left, no real choice. It was as if the motel had been steering me toward that door since the moment I arrived. The hallway to room 9 felt longer than before, stretching with each step. The air changed, colder, metallic. The wallpaper, once just faded and torn, now seemed wet, slick to the touch. My shoes left faint prints on the carpet, each one dark and damp, like I was walking through spilled ink. When I reached the door, I hesitated. The number 9 was almost invisible now, the brass plate dulled and cracked, the screw at the corner loose enough to turn on its own. The wood beneath it was darker than the rest of the doors, swollen, as if it had absorbed every drop of fear that had ever passed through it. A draft leaked from the gap underneath, carrying with it the faint scent of mildew, rainwater, and something else. Something human. I raised my hand and knocked once. The sound echoed longer than it should have, bouncing back in a strange delay, as if the hallway were deeper on the other side. Then the knob turned by itself. The door creaked open an inch, then 2. No sound, no movement from within. Just a dim light that seemed to pulse in and out, like a heartbeat. I pushed the door fully open. The flashlight flickered. The room was wrong. It looked almost normal at first, a standard motel setup. A bed, a desk, a small window half covered by faded curtains. But everything was slightly off. The proportions felt twisted, stretched too long, or compressed too short. The walls curved inward ever so slightly, bending reality around me. The air shimmered faintly, as though the space itself was breathing. On the desk sat an old tape recorder, one of these heavy black ones with big red buttons. Next to it was a half-burned candle and a small leather-bound guest book open to the middle. I stepped closer. The tape inside was already spinning. No sound came out for several seconds, just the faint mechanical whir. Then a voice, thin and distant, emerged from the static. This is Carter. Pinewood Motel. Night manager. A pause. If anyone finds this, don't stay past 3. The tape hissed, popping and skipping. The phones start first. They call from inside the walls. Then come the photos. Don't look at them. Don't. A sharp click. Then silence. The tape kept spinning. I reached to stop it, but the button was jammed. The reel began to rewind on its own, shrieking as the tape snapped inside the machine. The sound that followed wasn't mechanical anymore. It was wet, organic, breathing. The air thickened. In the reflection of the dusty window, I saw something move behind me. A shape, tall and pale, standing at the doorway. Not entering, not retreating, just watching. I turned, flashlight trembling in my grip. The hallway beyond the door was gone. In its place stretched a black corridor, endless, with dozens of identical doors on both sides, every single one marked with a brass 9. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. I stepped back into the room, slamming the door shut. The sound echoed deep, like the walls were hollow. The bulb overhead dimmed to a faint orange glow. Something on the wall caught my eye. A cluster of Polaroids, pinned in uneven rows above the bed. Each one showed a different version of this same room. In some, the furniture was clean. In others, the walls were cracked. In one, the bed was empty. In another, a dark stain spread across the sheets like oil. And in the last photo, the most recent one, someone stood in the middle of the room, me. The date written at the bottom corner, 3:03 a.m. I stared at it until I realized I could hear the same faint hum coming from behind the photo wall. I pressed my ear to the plaster. Voices. Whispers overlapping, dozens of them, all repeating the same word in different tones, in different versions of English, some distorted beyond recognition. Check in. The wall pulsed under my hand, like a slow heartbeat. A hairline crack split across the center of the plaster, spreading downward like a vein. Behind it, the sound grew louder. Wet, breathing, impatient. Then the light bulb shattered. Darkness swallowed the room. My flashlight flickered back on for a moment, just long enough to see the reflection in the window. There were 2 of me now, one standing in the middle of the room, holding the flashlight. The other just behind, expressionless, his mouth slightly open, his eyes black and wet. The second me whispered, barely audible, "You made it." The glass warped. I stumbled back, hitting the desk. The tape recorder flared with static again, then played a new sound, the ringing of the phone. Not from the lobby this time. From the nightstand beside the bed. I turned toward it, unable to breathe. The same beige rotary phone sat there, receiver trembling slightly. The ringing didn't sound electronic anymore. It sounded alive, like a heartbeat in sound form. It rang 3 times, then stopped. The line clicked, and I heard breathing. Slow, measured, perfectly matching my own. Daniel. The voice was clearer now, almost gentle, familiar. "You've already checked in." The receiver slipped from my hand and hit the floor. The lights flashed once, and for a single, merciful second, I saw the room for what it truly was. The walls blackened with mold, the furniture reduced to splinters, the air thick with the smell of rot and burnt plastic. And there, in the far corner, half hidden in the dark, was a figure slumped against the wall. A uniform, a name tag. Carter. The eyes were open, the mouth frozen mid-word. And around his wrist, looped tightly like a bracelet, hung the key to room 9. The lobby felt alive in a way that made my skin crawl. Every sound echoed strangely, every shadow moved with a life of its own, and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I realized, in a sudden, terrifying clarity, that I wasn't entirely in the motel anymore. Not really. Somewhere deep within its walls, in the static of the monitors, in the creaking floorboards and the whispering of the empty rooms, I had become part of it. Pinewood Motel wasn't just haunted. It was a trap. A machine for bending time and collecting fear. And I had already begun to unravel inside its machinery. The new night manager stepped fully inside the lobby, shaking off rain that dripped from his jacket onto the tile floor. His eyes darted nervously, scanning the dimly lit room as though he knew something was wrong but couldn't quite place it. He approached the guest book cautiously, and I could see the tension in his movements, the slight tremble in his hands. My own reflection caught in the window, pale and hollow-eyed, a frozen echo of the terror he would soon inherit. I wanted to warn him, to scream, to throw myself in front of him, but my body refused to obey. I could only watch as the inevitable unfolded. He picked up the phone on the counter. The receiver was cold, and the line buzzed with static that seemed alive, almost breathing. A whisper hissed through the receiver. "Check in." And the motel shifted. The lights flickered violently, shadows twisting along the walls, and the clock above the desk spun backward and forward in a maddening blur. Time itself was bending, the corridor stretching longer than it should, every door numbered 9, repeating infinitely into the darkness. The air pulsed, heavy and wet, with the sound of 1,000 distant, overlapping heartbeats. I felt the key in my pocket, the one I had taken from room 9, suddenly weighty in a way that made my fingers ache. I tried to resist, but it moved of its own accord, as if my hand had no choice but to follow its inevitable path. Step by step, I approached room 9. The door loomed larger than life, warped, breathing with a soft glow of light from within. The room inside was empty, yet it radiated a presence, a memory of every manager who had come before me. The furniture looked ordinary at first glance, but the proportions were off, subtly twisted. The bed sagged unnaturally in the middle. The dresser leaned slightly forward, and shadows pooled in the corners, shifting and writhing like living things. On the desk, a tape recorder clicked to life, the reel spinning on its own. A thin, distant voice echoed through the static. If anyone finds this, it's too late. The motel doesn't let go. The lights flickered again, and in the reflection of the window, I saw him, my double, standing silently behind me, expressionless, his eyes dark and wet. He whispered my name, his tone eerily calm. "You've already checked in." I stumbled back, heart hammering, and the room itself seemed to stretch and fold around me. The hallway outside room 9 twisted endlessly, doors multiplying into infinity, all marked with the same brass number. The monitors behind the counter flickered rapidly, showing multiple versions of the lobby, the hallways, and the parking lot, each repeating the same events at slightly different moments. Each iteration was slightly off, a subtle echo, a ghostly variant of reality. The motel was alive, aware, and it had claimed me in part. I could feel myself existing simultaneously in multiple spaces, here, behind the counter, and inside room 9, unable to escape either. Then, through the glass doors of the lobby, I saw headlights cutting through the rain outside. A car pulled into the empty lot, and a figure stepped out, the next night manager, completely unaware, carrying a duffel bag and wearing a jacket identical to mine. His movements were cautious, tentative, and I felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on me. The motel would not release him. It never had. The cycle would continue. I could no longer move freely. My body was part of the machinery. I was behind the counter, unable to warn, unable to act, just watching as the new arrival approached, drawn inexorably toward room 9. His hand reached for the logbook, and I knew exactly what would happen. His name would be added, the key would vanish, the phone would ring, and time would bend again. I could see the faint shadows of previous managers lingering around him, their eyes hollow, their mouths whispering silent warnings, trapped in the loop. The lobby shifted once more. The lights flickered, the air thickened, and the sound of the phone ringing filled the room. The new manager picked up the receiver, a static filling his ears, the same whisper, "Check in." The floorboards seemed to vibrate beneath him, as if the building itself was breathing. And then, everything snapped into stillness. The lobby returned to its original, mundane appearance. The counter gleamed under warm fluorescent light, the clock ticked normally, and the guest book lay open with only a pen resting beside it. Outside, rain fell softly, and the neon vacancy sign flickered in lazy pink light. The new manager stood there, drenched, exhausted, completely unaware that he had already entered the motel's trap. My reflection in the glass window remained, a frozen echo, and somewhere deep within the walls, I existed still. A whisper among the static, a ghost in the endless loop of 3:03 a.m. Room 9 remained silent but alive. Its door closed with a soft finality, but the air around it pulsed with history, with fear, with the memory of every night manager who had come and disappeared. The Polaroids, the tape recorder, the key. All were waiting. Waiting for the next one to arrive, the next one to pick up the phone, the next one to check in. And as the lights flickered one final time, the motel whispered its invitation, soft and patient, carrying the weight of every trapped soul within its walls. Welcome back. The neon sign sputtered again, glowing half-heartedly. Vacancy! The cycle had claimed another. The loop continued, and somewhere inside, I could feel the pulse of the building. Steady, eternal, unstoppable. Pinewood Motel was alive, and it would wait. It always waited.